from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Oh, that was a short version, Tony.
I know.
That wasn't all the good music. Usually I have a little bit of a dance before I come on live.
Ooh.
What happened?
I could put a little music on too.
I bet you could. Hello, everyone. Aren't you excited that you just joined a private conversation that was going on between us? You have joined the Distill show, a 360 degree of a view of life in sports. The whole thing threw me. The whole thing threw me.
It was the dancing thing.
And we are so happy to have you here. My name is Wendy Rosenthal, and I am alongside my diehard, amazing, wonderful host and partner, Ira
Schwitzer.
And we are extremely... Thank you, Tony. Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody needs
man.
applause.
Everybody needs applause. We are partners in the Distillery Inc., which is a company that works with athletes to repurpose their athletic intelligence and help to create a really amazing life for them beyond their playing years, which is why we believe we have the right to sit here and talk to you about all things to do with sports. We're passionate, we love it, and we're very excited to be here every couple of weeks at our third or fourth home, we call you, the UBN Radio Network. We are so grateful to be here. We love you guys. Thank you, Tony. Tony's sitting
Love
in
you
for
back.
our security blanket,
Jarvis.
who is not here, but will be here shortly. But you're just as good. We love you just as much.
You didn't say I was as cute, though.
That's a toss-up. There's something about Jarvis. There's something about Jarvis.
Right.
Anyway, we are very, very happy today because we have an incredible guest with us, a gentleman who, for many reasons, we've wanted to have on the show for a long time. First of all, he's very wonderful, very funny. He's
No pressure.
No pressure.
And he is to blame for the hat you're sporting today.
He is to blame for the hat I am sporting today. We're jumping right in. As you all know, that I like to change my hat up every couple of weeks, and I try and make it so that it has something to do with our guest or our topic of the week. And you might be wondering why I am wearing a University of Texas hat when everybody knows that Ira and I are actually Trojan, diehard USC Trojan, students, alumni,
everything, fans,
supporters.
all of it.
I am wearing this hat because we have the wonderful and amazing Jerren Wright here with us today. And Jerren, welcome.
Can we double that applause? I want to hear
At
more.
least.
I need
Go
more
ahead,
of that
Tony,
applause.
go for it. He gets more applause.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you.
So normally, if you know anything about the University of Texas, you know that it is a burnt orange and kind of white are the colors.
Yeah.
And I have a hat. I have more than one hat with those colors, but today I couldn't wear that one. And that is because even though I wanted to honor our guest and thank him for being here, you also were on the team that kicked, I'm going to say it very frankly, kicked our asses in the 2005 National Championship.
Yes.
Football game.
Very painful.
It was painful and
game
crushed us
to witness.
Yes. And so we are
And mourning.
wearing black.
And I am celebrating
We are
on the
still
other
in
side
mourning.
of the table. So.
We are still in mourning. How many
Yeah.
years later? That would be what, 18? No,
11.
10 or 11 years.
12 years
Yeah.
later. We are still in mourning. So even though I wanted to respect and honor you, we had to do it in the black way.
No, I appreciate this. I'm glad we're going live right now because all of my friends are happy about your hat selection
Are
right
they?
now. Yeah, probably. So
Well, we do have a connection to the University of Texas.
Yes.
I have my family's from Austin. My grandfather used to be the president of the university. My dad went there. And funny, Jerren, I was looking up your bio and noticed that you were a Texas Cowboy.
I was.
As was my father.
Nice.
Yeah. And he was a cheerleader, funny enough.
Yeah, the cheerleaders actually came up with the hand sign we use now for the university, the hook'em sign. So Harley Clark, I think is his name. So
What year?
That's a great question. It's a part of our, when you join Cowboys, you have to know this sort of thing. So I should know, but it's been a long time.
Well,
but yeah, it's a prestigious organization on campus, the Cowboys.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know, they're the guys who shoot the cannon every time we score. There's a new quarter and all that kind of stuff. So it was fun.
So my dad loved being in it, and this was in the early 60s. So, he's a long time
Die hard. Bleed it.
Trust, he does. He bleeds it, and in games, when we had the big game here in LA,
Yeah.
he sat in the Texas section.
Of course he did. Yeah.
Yeah, he did.
But you guys got redemption, so that's a good thing. We're mourning
It
from
helped,
the 10-year
but I'm not
loss.
going to say it was anywhere near.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted you to
Redemption.
say that.
It's
how I
just,
felt.
yeah.
It was not.
I don't know that we'll ever recover. Really.
Not really.
Yeah.
I also want to welcome our correspondent from the UK, Marshall Norball, who is a sports presenter.
And up very late. Thank you,
very
Marshall.
late, and always contributes to our conversations in a very unique manner. And we wanted him here to talk with Jerren as well, because I'm sure he's going to have lots of questions. And we're doing something really unusual. I want you to know, Jerren, this is the first time in our relatively short history that we have just had a guest on to have a conversation.
Perfect.
With no agenda, we'll just see where it goes. So I'm a little nervous.
Are you?
I'm a little like, oh my gosh. But we want to, you have a lot to say and you've done a lot, and you're so aligned with kind of what we talk about at the distillery, and the fact that you are an athlete at the collegiate level, at the highest collegiate level, with a national championship ring, and you have gone on to have a really amazing career beyond your life in sports. And I want to give you a couple of minutes to talk about that. But not only that, you're an activist, you support charities, you do a lot, and we just wanted to talk to you about lots of different things.
Sure.
So as soon as you have shared with us a little bit more details, we'll get into that. I just want to say that we want to hear from you as well. If you have any questions or you want to add anything to the conversation, please feel free to call us at 323-284-7826, or you can Skype UBN Radio 1 guest, or please comment on Facebook Live, because I am watching, and I always answer your comments if I can. So, and we already have Mike Swinney on board,
Of course.
who is saying, hi, Jerren,
Hi,
and
Mike.
how did you like all those interviews you guys had to go through the last couple of days?
Yeah, it's been fun.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
All right. Why don't you give us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so you touched on it a little bit. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. Went to the University of Texas at Austin, ironically on an academic scholarship. Wasn't really intending on playing football when I first got there, but on the recommendation of a good friend, Selvin Young, who I played high school and college football with, who played for the Denver Broncos for many years, recommended that to walk on the team. And he said, hey, give me your highlight tape from high school. I'll walk it over to the coaches. It was received warmly and ended up making the team. So didn't come in a star or anything like that. I'm fully aware of how hard it is to get any playing time at all at Texas, even if you're a big-time 5-star recruit. So much to sort of my pleasure, Coach Brown saw something in me and let me play limited action my last 2 years on special teams and cleanup time and things like that. So it was such an honor to be there, and I just happened to be there at the right place at the right time. And, Vince Young and all the sort of NFL talent we had came in at that time when I was there too. So, by my junior and senior year, we're in a Rose Bowl and a national championship, and changed everybody's life, to be quite honest. So,
Can I ask how that changed your life? Because you say it like very casually, like it changed my life. But I mean, it's
one of those things, like it's a continuum, right? Like you come into more realization as time goes on. So when you're young, you're just excited about, you want a big game and you got a ring and all this stuff. But as you get older and you get into your career and you have conversations with folks around town, you realize that it was a major accomplishment, and you start to look back on all the hard work. Whether you were a star or not, you were still up at 6 a.m., lifting weights and running until you throw up or whatever, and maintaining your class schedule and things like that. So now in my professional life, I'm able to draw on those things, and to be quite frank, it's on my resume now. And so when I go, talk to an employer, they know that I'm not going to cut corners or, if I need to stay up all night and work or get up really early and work. Yeah. These are things that are second nature, to be quite honest.
Absolutely.
And I want to give a quick shout out to my old coaches, Coach Akina, Coach Brown, and Mad Dog, our strength and conditioning coach, for instilling those things in me, because I'm using that today. So it's life-changing in that way, professionally, and just habit-wise too. So.
Well, I mean, you raised something that is very near and dear to the distillery's heart, and that is, how athletes who get to that level. Even like you're saying, as a walk-on, you may not be the star, but you're still getting up with the team. You're still doing all the things that you have to do in terms of your physical maintenance to your academic requirements. And, we always believe that, or we always say that our athletes have something unique that the rest of us don't have that gives you a competitive advantage. And that is being in a structure that pushes you to have a certain type of discipline and have a certain type of attitude going into the types of things that you have to do. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because, I mean, quite frankly, I say this with a little bit of sadness. Not every athlete understands that they have that and can translate that. How did you see that, working beyond your career, and why do you think that there are so many athletes that struggle with it?
Yeah, so for me, I think the critical distinction is kind of my place on the team. And so I wouldn't even call myself a role player. Like, I played sparingly, and I sort of knew my part in practice. Like, my job is to give a good look to the offense, or get run over by Henry Melton, our 300-pound, running back at the time.
Was that part of the play, really? Can you just go stand out there and get run over by him?
I'm supposed to make the tackle, but it happens sometimes.
Yeah.
But, shout out to Henry. He's now all-pro defensive tackle, wonderful career in the NFL. But long story short, I knew my role in the team wasn't to be the star. So, at the time, you're like, man, it would be great to be, Michael Huff and win a Thorpe Award. But now, many years later, knowing myself, would it have been the best thing for me having those accolades or having all that attention? Because what it did was show me, hard work in the trenches without much recognition. It eventually pays off. So, my, ability to memorize formations and yell them to my teammates on the field helped our team. And then, as a part of that, I ended up with a national championship ring too. So I did my small part that helped our team win a big goal that has now been beneficial for me in my career. So, and beyond that, as a lawyer studying for the bar exam, when I can sit by myself for 13 hours a day for 2 months straight, and that's not an exaggeration, and other lawyers will tell you, that discipline to do that for me came from football, sports, to be quite honest. Yeah. Like, getting up at 5 a.m. every morning, being on time, accountability, those things never leave you. And so to your second point, why doesn't it work for certain athletes? It's a choice, to be quite honest. And there's some variables, right? Like, some folks come from certain socioeconomic backgrounds or deal with certain things in their life that become sort of barriers for them. But ultimately, I've seen it happen over and over where people from all backgrounds come into a structured environment like a college football program and ultimately just succeed like crazy afterwards. So,
sure.
I think that the tendency is to focus on that, but there are so many amazing success stories of folks who take that same sort of trajectory and make it work for them. So,
and I think it's interesting that you say it's a choice. I mean, I think for you in particular, you came from a university that actually does a really great job at supporting its student athletes. It's got the entire Center for Student Leadership Innovation. That's just incredible in terms of what it does. So, there are places that will provide a structure. It'll give you a set of tools. It'll provide you with information. But at the end of the day, it really is a choice, isn't it?
It's
whether
a choice.
Whether you're going to take that and internalize that and put forth the effort. It's not an easy transition to make, though. I mean, certainly if you aren't raised with that mentality, if you haven't really been taught how to take a set of tools and internalize them and really apply them to life, how is it that you can, as a student athlete who's so busy with a sports curriculum, academic requirements, figure out or even take the time to think about a life beyond sports? Because not everyone's going to do, you talked earlier about not needing all those accolades. It wasn't meant for you. That's a unique perspective, because I think for so many student athletes, they do walk into this thinking, I have to win. This is going to be all I'm going to be able to do. So it's got to be football, or it's got to be basketball, whatever it is. It's not going to be meant for everyone.
Yeah, and I want to say, one of your teammates, Ricky Brown, had a conversation with us one day where he was saying that, it didn't matter what role you played on the team. When you walked on the field, 90,000 people in the stadium are roaring and applauding you, and, you feel it. And there's a big letdown when you kind of move on, and it's like you're not walking into your office. Like, I'm sure when you walk into your office, are people going, yeah,
well, I'm a huge nerd, so like when I say hello to the people at the front desk, I get fired up walking in. So
you're the one going, hey,
exactly.
Good to see you.
I got the smoke coming out when I walk in. Like, it's a whole production, but.
But is there a point where you can look back and say, I made a conscious choice? to make the very best of this, to make sure that no matter what, I walked away from UT with the very best that I could, that I set myself up for success.
I won't call myself an anomaly by any means, but I
Yeah.
think I had a different approach. Whereas I came in academic focused from the outset. So
Yeah.
I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer since I was probably 10 years old or something like that. So my goals are very different. And so I don't want to take away actually from my teammates and other student athletes who come
Sure.
in with a very singular focus
Yeah.
to be a pro athlete.
Yeah.
That's a legitimate goal in and of itself.
Yeah.
I think what you can do is take comfort in the fact that not everybody has it figured out that early. So there's a lot of pressure to know what you're going to do outside of the academic arena, or I'm sorry, outside of the athletic arena once you
Sure.
get done playing. But the reality is no 22 or 23-year-old
Yeah.
really has it figured out
Right.
anyway. And even
Right.
if you do go on to play professional sports, your sports life is a very limited amount of time. So, by the time you are retired and trying to figure it out again, you still aren't that far behind a lot of folks. So,
Yeah.
I did a lot of schooling in grad school, so I didn't even really start my career, quote unquote, until, about 5-6 years ago. So I'm relatively new to even getting my career going. So it's just having some perspective and patience with yourself, really, and keeping yourself in good situations and making good choices so that you remain on track. So you give yourself the space to make a good decision or find a good track for yourself. So, and the other thing I want to say is success is relative, right? So you have to enter it with that sort of framework. And so like somebody who's a movie star makes $1 million, that's one way to measure success.
Sure,
A
right.
teacher
One path,
who
yeah.
impacts a lot of kids on a daily basis, that's another form of success. So it doesn't have to be on a stage or in the spotlight. There's a
Right.
lot of ways to skin the cat, so to speak.
And
So
we talk about that at the distillery because, again, at the end of the day, it's figuring out what your particular passions are,
Right.
what it is that's going to define success for you.
Sure.
As opposed to having to figure out what it looks like for someone else and trying to emulate that success. I also loved earlier how you talked about, at the time you didn't really know what was going on. You weren't really aware of the magnitude of
Right.
what had happened or what was happening until much later in life, which I think sort of, lends itself to the idea that mentorship is so important because you have to have guys like you who can come back and say, when you're 18, 19, 20, you don't know.
Yeah.
5, 10, 20 years down the line, you're going to have a sense of it. But for right now, it's so helpful to hear someone who's been there and can come back and share some of that information.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I agree that being a 20-year-old, most of us didn't know. We were in university going, okay, what the heck are we going to do? So it's not an uncommon thing for a college student to go through what maybe a college athlete goes through. But, we also see the struggle that athletes who are go into a professional career and then have to come out the other side, who have had that experience, who've had that time still struggling in such a deep and painful way, at least, we're not the only ones who've seen it. I mean, it's in the news very often. It's not an uncommon conversation, and it isn't just about football. It goes across every sport imaginable, even those athletes who are going into the Olympics or, they're not professionals per se. So I think it's interesting because I don't think mentorship stops with being young and having somebody who can talk to you from, the perspective of I'm 40 and now you're 20. I think it's something, I think it's having a structure all along the way.
Right. Yes.
Don't you think?
completely agree. Even when you're in the pros, like the folks around me who I've seen, and again, I have a limited sample set, but the pro athletes that I've seen that come out on the other side and do really well are people who were not necessarily knew what they wanted to do after, but kept really good company around them to help teach them basically big general lessons that can apply to anything like financial management. No matter what you do or how much money you make, that management is an important skill. And being around good people who like just do good business in general and have a good sense for those things, you keep yourself around those people with the structure so that when you come out of it, that this isn't anything out of the ordinary. This structure is important to a different type of success. So,
did you see that? It was on Twitter that Shaq came out with in a speech. They recorded it where he basically said, "Look, it's really simple, stupid. Literally, he said, take 50% of what you earn and pretend like it isn't yours."
Yeah.
And then take 25% of what's left and pretend like it isn't yours, and you'll have plenty of money. Sorry, you'll have plenty of money. I got very excited about that. For the rest of your life. It actually caused some controversy because there's a whole thing like how many people in the world can afford to live on 25% of what they make.
Right.
But
his audience is very different, though, right?
Exactly.
Like, it's a general. I guess he's making a big generalization to a bigger audience, but he's talking to a bunch of pro athletes
Yeah.
who make money,
That they can live on,
Not that he made,
20%.
because Shaq made a lot of money now. Let's be clear about that. But,
Yeah.
you're making a big amount of money for a short amount of time.
Sure.
And so you amortize that across a lot of years. You're not actually
Making that much money.
not in the long run, right?
Right.
So, and you never want to, count your chickens before they hatch. So you don't know what can happen in life beyond your professional life, and you might need it, so.
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank those who've joined us on Facebook Live. Thank you. Welcome. And if you have any comments, please feel free to comment in the space below. I wanted to. Now, you didn't say this in your bio, but you now work for Amazon Studios.
I do.
And you've worked in and around the entertainment industry since you left law school.
So, yeah, since I got to
It's
law school. Yeah.
Okay. So, I can't help but asking, are there comparisons between, the nature of the entertainment industry and the nature of the sports industry that you've seen just being a part of both?
Yeah, sure. And let me just start by saying none of my opinions reflect or on behalf of my present employer. So
You're such a
get
good,
that-
Such a
get
good
that
lawyer.
disclaimer.
You're such a
you
good
are such
lawyer.
a good attorney. I love
And nothing
it.
you say here, you don't reflect our opinions either.
Yeah, so got to protect myself
Got
a little
it.
bit.
Well
and the
done.
company. and the
Yes, we're
company.
Good
all
for
on
you.
board.
You
We're
don't
all-
bite the hand that feeds you.
You
but,
got it. We wouldn't want you to.
Yeah, it's very similar. I mean, here's the reality is here's why organized sports and football in particular, in my case, is so important, because competition is everywhere. You can't avoid it. Can't get away from it.
Right.
You can turn it on and off at certain times. Like my preference is like around family, you turn it off and enjoy and absorb and that kind of thing, and friends or whatever, unless you're playing a game or whatever the case may be. But in the professional world, it's a competition. More often than not, I found that it's a competition with yourself. The better you do your job and keep blinders on and focus on what's in front of you, the better you tend to do. You have some self-awareness and you're cordial to the folks around you and you're a good teammate and you're accountable. But ultimately, Coach Brown says this, Mac Brown I'm referring to, Hall of Fame coach for the University of Texas. He always said, you have to be consistently good to be great.
Yeah.
So just keeping your head down and doing those little things right every day, eventually you end up building a pretty big house out of a few bricks. So,
Sure.
so that sports is important. Like you can't teach that anywhere else. That it actually never goes away, and you have an advantage because you know how to fight through adversity. You can play hurt, quote unquote, and I'm using that as a metaphor.
Yeah.
You know how to work when you're tired. You can take criticism really well because after every practice and every game, you watch film and your coaches coach
Sure.
you hard and they're throwing remotes in the room and things like that. But you can take that. You get yelled at in front of 100,000 people, 3 million people on TV.
Right.
That criticism is at work is nothing compared to that.
No,
and you're 18 years old, so
Listen, that's one of the things I think makes elite athletes the strongest. And when I say elite athletes, to
you're
me,
not
that's
talking about me, is what you're about to say, right? just kidding.
Yeah.
I just want to confirm that on air for all my friends watching. I'm not making that.
Jerren is considered an elite athlete.
She said it, not me.
It is my opinion.
Thank you.
And we run this show, and our opinions count the most.
Perfect.
Yes.
No, and to me, any athlete that ends up getting to play at the collegiate level is an elite athlete because, first of all, I mean, even having been around the few that I have when I was in school, like I saw what they had to go through. That's not easy.
Right.
So it's an elite position. You are one of a few.
Yeah.
I would say we have elite want to, because athleticism is one thing, but wanting to get up and work hard every day
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a
to play a
different
sport,
mindset.
it's mental.
But
Yeah.
you've done it for
Yeah.
a long time. I mean, you may not have done it like obsessively before you got into to the university, but it's you eat, drink, sleep it. That's what you're going to do day in and day out. So if you get to the collegiate level and you are even a walk-on on a team, you're an elite athlete.
Sure.
And I think, what's so interesting and that we don't see a lot of is the ability of people to take criticism in the way that an athlete can. And that, to me, is such a desirable skill and tool. Like, I've seen in my work life, grown men cry because somebody critiqued them. No, seriously,
No, I
because
know.
their boss said something and it's like, forget it. For 2 weeks, they can't even, they don't even want to get out of bed and come into work. And so that's why Aaron and I talk about all the time that the playing field, the sandbox that athletes grow up in is like the best training ground, like for any kind of, higher level manager, somebody who wants to really have a stellar career, whatever level they're at, it doesn't matter. The athletes have an advantage that they don't even know. They don't even realize sometimes.
I would argue that the ability to take criticism really well is actually very disarming, because, if your boss or your supervisor is trying to give you like really tough criticism, if you react really emotionally to something that's very concrete and constructive, then you've now given your boss a reason to not trust you, so to speak.
Sure.
But if you
Exactly.
can take it, and sure, it hurts sometimes, of course, but if you can, metabolize it and do a better job or fix that problem, then you've now you've disarmed the situation that could have escalated, and now the focus is back on the work and not on anything else. Like that,
Right.
The goal is very singular. Like, is your business or your school or your students or whatever you do in life, are you achieving your goals?
Yeah.
In that regard. So,
I want to ask Marshall. I just want to bring him into the conversation because, in overseas, you don't have the same type of sports system through the college that we do, right? And, how do you see kids coming into the major sports in the rest of the world where there isn't a college landscape for them to cut their teeth on, and how do you see them being able to transition to that, and what skills do they get built up in whatever systems that there are overseas?
Normally, systems that we do have in this country is more per sport than as opposed to on a collegiate level, say in the States. So, for example, if you're a young, talented footballer, you hope to be spotted at a very young age by one of the bigger clubs in England. And then you go through the process of going through different youth level football. So maybe, for example, you could be picked up by an Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester City, whoever, at the age of approximately, 6 to 8. Often it can be a little bit older, but that tends to be the
6 to
youngest
8?
age. Yeah, you can be.
6.
Honestly, right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It starts to really. They have teams at that age. Again, it's just more to develop them, and just to see where their abilities are at. As you start to get older, they then have an under 12s group, and then they'll have maybe an under 15s group, because you're still at the age of where you're developing. And then eventually it gets to maybe about under 17s level, which is also where it starts to meet a kind of an international level of playing professional football. So recently, England's so-called youngsters have done very well over the last summer, winning championships at under 19 and under 17 level. And then from there, it's kind of, you have to prove to cut your teeth to get the opportunity to go into the first team or kind of a reserve squad of teams in the for the Premier League, or even for a championship side in the lower level of professional football. So it's not really the same. It's kind of, it's really very much up to the relationship that often a parent can have with the organisation, with the football club, and to ensure that basically, okay, we may have an idea that your child wants to be a professional athlete. However, they do need to think about, their education still. They're only allocated certain days or certain evenings a week to train with the club that they're actually working with. Yep. They still need to complete the education. They still have to go through that completely. And then they're also trying to inform them, look, we want him or her to make it. However, they need to think of plan B. So it's a completely different system than it is to the USA.
For better or for worse? You have an opinion?
Yeah, I like the idea. I've always liked structure and order, and I always feel that when you are already going to, say, a college in the States, and you work and you're a collegiate athlete, the biggest quality I feel that you get is the discipline and the responsibility and the accountability that you take on as being part of a team. And I think there's nothing that can teach you that like sport. And as Jerren was explaining, he's been able to take that from what he's learned being very successful with the Longhorns to now moving into his own business and his professional life, and how that has a positive impact, how that clients that he works with can trust and know his attitude and commitment to the work that he will do. So I always prefer that as a structure.
Oh, that's great. Great perspective.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, maybe slightly controversial, and again, you might want to
Speak in generalities.
waver yourself before. No, but look, we've been really fortunate in that the University of Texas has been very open to us to have the conversation about how to help student athletes. Mm-hmm. And we've found, either openly or kind of subtly being said throughout the system, that people recognize there are real problems in how students come through university systems. And we happen to think that the University of Texas is one of the best at trying to support its athletes.
Agree.
But I mean, as somebody who was there and seeing it, I mean, I think they can do so much more. Where do you think it's broken? What do you think's going on?
I don't think it's limited to one school per
No.
se. It's pretty ubiquitous. Like, this problem is it's not even, I won't call it a problem even to start out, but it's very pervasive, right? You're trying to solve or change a person in a 4-year, maybe 5 to 6 year window. So you're trying to either, in sort of not bad scenarios, but scenarios where there's definitely change needed. You're trying to reverse habits and deal with emotional issues, or even psychological sometimes, or even financial management, or things that have gone on in the home. You're trying to fix and tweak these things in a very short window. So I wouldn't even say that it's that the university's failing the kids per se. It's just that now that we know more about the total person, the needs of the total person and student athlete, that now all universities across the board have to start thinking more long term. And it's tough because you're bringing in 80, or 25 to 30 recruits a year. Yep. Your team is 150 kids large with staff, et cetera.
Well, and you have 19 sports in some
exactly.
universities.
Men's and women's sports. So there's a lot of student athletes to sort of to take care of and give those services to. So I think it becomes a problem where you have to institute plans that are more long-term thinking. So, counseling service. And some schools have actually done this. So you have counseling services and things where the kids can go somewhere to talk to somebody, or people on staff. And I know we've done this in Texas too, who are, their sole job is to be there for you on, as a mentor or an emotional level, or provide a father figure, so to speak. And there's there's appropriate or proper positions for this. I'm not naming the name because I don't know what it's called, but I know the position exists.
Sure.
And so there's steps to be made. So there's some of it's scalability. It's tough to implement these long-term programs on a budget, so to speak. And, some schools don't pull in as much money as the University of Texas does, or USC, whatever the case may be. So, how do you allocate those funds to build those programs? And do the big schools with all the money get the best programs? So, you run into equity issues. And so I think, there is a need for it. The problem can be solved, but it's a process-driven solution, and not a, what is the one thing that will help us, because the problems are so variable.
Yeah, there isn't one solution.
Exactly.
Across the board.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, and it's also tying together many different departments. Just what we've seen at the University of Texas. You've got the Department of Social Work working with the Department of Athletics, that's working with the Department of Communications, which you know very well. And, it's a lot of moving parts is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, and all under the Board of Regents and the state government. So you have a lot of layers of, folks who need to clear things, and stakeholders who have to sign off. So it becomes a more, pervasive issue to deal with. But there are small things you can do to deal with it. So and recognition is just one of the first steps you can use to solve it, which is to say, these kids are coming from all walks of life, and we can't just address food and nutrition. Mental health is important too, and things like that. So.
Yeah, and I think it's another really great point, is that it's a melting pot at every university.
Right.
I mean, every athletic team, every sports team, professional or not, is a melting pot of people who come from different places with different backgrounds, and you're trying to homogenize it a little bit because you have to, which is so difficult. It's a great point.
And then you have coaches on staff who, if people actually knew how hard coaches work between the recruiting, where you're on a plane across the country, half the year, and then you're up till 3, 4 a.m. studying tape, and then coaching the game, and then trying to get a little sleep, see your family, be a good family man, and all this kind of stuff, or person for there's men and women on staff these days, but it's actually really hard. So then you're trying to mentor your position group and spend quality time and text these guys too. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's definitely hard. So, when the NCAA starts to recognize that, hey, these kids are making us a lot of money, let's start to pour into some programs that can help them very long term, not just the few years when they get out and they're pros and all that. There's other kids who need help too who will never go pro,
Well, it's 1 to 2% will go pro of every college athlete in the United States. It's very, very, very small.
And the NFL average is like, 3 years or something like that?
Yeah, I think it's 4 now.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when we had Chris Plonsky on the show, who is the women's athletic director and assistant athletic director at University of Texas, she was talking to us a little bit about, it was in the context of women in sports and why aren't there as many female coaches as there are male. One of the things that she brought up is something that you just brought up, is that being a coach is really tough.
Yeah.
Like, it is not a small time position in the sense of the hours that you spend and the time you have to put in, and how many coaches do their very best to engage with all of the players, like not just the star players. They really try and get down to every level of player, no matter what. And that's what you've seen, obviously. Yeah,
I've been very fortunate in the coaches I had at the University of Texas. I mean, I know my teammates still text all of our coaches who have moved on or gone elsewhere since. We still text them to this day and check in and say hello. And I was talking to Quan Cosby today, who's one of our.
Oh, that's so funny. We know him now.
Yeah, exactly.
He's so cool guy. He's very cool.
And when we frequently talk, and we had dinner down in Austin a couple of weeks ago, and we were just talking about how he went up to Stanford to visit Dwayne Aquino, who's now the defensive backs coach at Stanford, and he was our DB coach. And so these relationships, they're long lasting, and to our coach's credit, they really invested in our entire roster from top to bottom, and so we've been very fortunate in that regard, but it's a thing that I hope happens everywhere.
Yeah, and it may or may not. That's you can't. That's what's so interesting about our travels in any event, is there's so many differences between from university to university. Right. The level, are they one of the big high-powered universities, or are they just a small university that happens to have a really good sports program? It's very different. So I want to move on because time goes by so fast. It's like I'm already like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Okay, so we said we'd open it up to lots of different conversations. Sure. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because it's prevalent in my house, and I'm suspecting in Aros too, because our sons are both incredible football fanatics. Yeah. And they both want to play desperately. And we're starting our sons in flag football. And anytime you say that, I don't know about you, but I get well, I would never I hope your son loses the desire. I'm never going to let my kid play. And, we've seen over the last few weeks, especially in the NFL, some pretty horrific injuries, things that are unpleasant, and we'll leave the unsportsmanlike conduct stuff to the side. What do you see as the future? I get scared, actually, funny enough. Like, I love football so much. It pains me to see all of this, and I want my son, if he ends up being 15 and really has a huge desire to play, I want to be able to say it's okay. Like, what do you see around what's going on in your own personal experience with the safety of the sport and the desirability, or is it a sport people really should send their kids to play?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think you guys are the only ones having that conversation right now. Yeah. And statistically speaking, I think, the numbers in Little League football have begun to decline just a little bit. So, I think the country's thinking about that on the whole. But, I have mixed emotions about it too. This is a game that in my family, my dad was an All-American cornerback in college too, and all my cousins played and were great athletes in football and things like that. So for me, it's tough because football teaches you, like we've already talked about it, such amazing lessons that you actually can't even learn in any other sport. If one person on the football field doesn't do their job, it messes up an entire play, in theory. So the accountability in those lessons are huge. But on the other side of that token is, the health situation. So you have an interesting juxtaposition where you have, this sort of imputed knowledge where we all sort of know, or we should know based on the information available to us, the long-term effects of head trauma. We'll just go ahead and say it.
Right.
But on the other hand, we know that this is a sport, similar to a lot of other sports where you assume the risk of injury. Yeah. So, I think you weigh those two things against the backdrop of there's a lot of sports where you can get hurt really bad. There's racing, there's action sports, there's boxing, where you're actually taking head trauma and counting the points.
Sure. Can I tell you? I read something, and Marshall maybe would know about this, but I actually read that in football, proper football,
Soccer for our American audience.
Yeah. I have to say proper football because it's
I got you.
That
It
there's
is
this,
proper football.
It is. There's as much head trauma in football.
Yes.
Than there is in American football because of the heading,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's a big issue, and that it's becoming a much bigger issue.
On the women's side of the game, especially right now, there's a big movement to actually eliminate headers up to the age of 13 or something like that.
Right.
And we'll have to fact check here, but I think like Brandy Chastain and all those the women on those famous 90s U.S. National teams are at the forefront of this. Because the concussions with headers are actually a big deal now. Yeah. And so it's
equal to what is going on in American football.
Right. Yeah. The numbers are comparable for sure. So, I think this isn't I don't think this issue is limited to just football.
No, it's not.
It's just a type of injury that we know now, the long-term effects. We've actually seen now what it does, especially with the proliferation of news and social media. We can see a junior say out or, things like that, what happens to them at the end of their life.
There's more attention being drawn to something that's always been an issue, always been a concern. Yeah. But you said we'll put aside the
no, we don't have
conduct,
to. Go for it.
And I cannot.
Please
put it
don't.
aside for a second
Please
because,
don't. I really don't want you to.
Part of watching the sport, we've talked a lot about student athletes and what they learn and how they behave and sort of, for a lot of them, they're growing up on this massive global platform where everyone's watching you make these mistakes at the age of 18, 19 that, normally so many of us can make behind closed doors, right? But now we're looking at the pros, and there's some behavior being exhibited that is just, forget telling my son you can't play because you might get hurt. I'm having him watch these games where these players are really acting out of line. What is going on now on the professional level that seems to have gotten a little out of hand? It's become much more extreme now than it has.
So are you referring specifically to some of the hits and the things like that? I don't know. 15, 20 years ago, the game was probably more physical than it is now. And with those kinds of hits and crackbacks, and we were always taught, call it out when it happens. So if you're playing receiver or you're playing, cornerback, I guess, and you see the receiver going full steam ahead to take out your linebacker who's kind of coming outside to make a tackle, then it's your fault if he gets hit like that because you should have alerted him that this crackback is coming. So none of this stuff is new. Cheap shots are, if you go watch, 80s, 70s, 60s football, go back to your NFL films, you see guys like Night Train and Jack Tatum and all these guys clotheslining people and, they're eye gouging in the piles. Some of this stuff it's not new. It's just, it gets more coverage. We have a 24-hour, not a news network, an NFL network that covers football 24/7, ESPN, Fox. So it gets a lot more coverage these days, but it has happened forever. And, I think one of the Steelers secondary guys came out and said, this is a part of the game. Let us play. So some of it's dirty and you have to protect your brothers on the field there. But some of this stuff is a part of the game. I don't want to use the word war lightly because there are real wars being waged in the world. But, it's combat, we'll call it. So, it's a collision sport.
And you get that for what has to happen on the field during the course of play.
Sure.
But is that so your opinion for once the whistle's blown and the play has come to an end? Some of these cheap shots that have taken place after the fact?
Like Gronk, elbowing the guy in the head. To me, that's a little out of line because, the play's over and you gave the guy a concussion. So you have contributed unnecessarily to potentially, long-term health issues. Yeah. That wasn't cool at all, especially he's not looking at you. If you're going to get into it or whatever, at least let him face you and you get into it. But those kind of cheap shots, that's just unnecessary.
Is that kind of behavior on the rise from your opinion, or is that...
I think that kind of stuff's always happened.
Much like the injuries, we're just now able to draw more attention to it because of the various social media platforms and media coverage.
Or maybe the referees are calling it more. Maybe stuff like that was going on and they weren't calling. Because I have to say, having been to a few games this season, to the Rams games, I got to tell you, every other play, if not every play, there's a flag. Yeah. And I don't know if there's a heightened call for referees to call more, to not like you're saying, let us play, and they're not, because then they're getting it from one. I don't know what's going on, but I got to tell you, 3 weeks ago we were at the Rams game. It was like, God, please
I mean,
I was saying, please let them play.
Yeah.
It's driving me nuts.
Right.
some of it's self-discipline. Like, we were taught when the whistle blows, stop. Like,
Yeah.
be violent, do your thing, make your play, do your job, open to the whistle, because you don't want to get a penalty that'll cost your team. So to me, that's the distinction.
Sure.
But, now you have to look at it from a production standpoint. There's a whole lot more cameras in the stadium
Yeah.
now than there were 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So they can actually see everything.
Every angle.
So when Baker Mayfield did the crotch grab or whatever, probably 15, 20 years ago, the camera's not doing this following him on the sideline when he's like probably thinks he's off to the side.
Sure.
Maybe. But, we probably have to go further back. But, that's something to think about. And then the NFL's brand, like they are very protective over their brand because it's worth billions of dollars. So now with the rise of sort of the knowledge of what the injuries and long-term effects of, head trauma are and the how people feel about the game on the whole and it
Sure.
going global too. So you're trying to protect your global audience too. They probably want to clean it up just a little bit within reason so
Right.
that it's more palatable to more people.
To more people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to say your friend Annie. Annie, I'm sorry, I cannot
It's
pronounce
okay.
your name. She's saying hi.
Sure.
She's
Hi.
saying hi to you and says football makes more money than other sports. So maybe that's. I don't think that's true, actually.
I don't think so either. Yeah.
Yeah, I think proper
I
football.
was going to say proper football makes a
way
significant
more.
amount of money.
Yes.
Way more.
Not
money.
even close. Yeah.
So-
the NFL do all right though.
They do well.
All right.
Yeah, no, they're
They
not-
do all right. No one's denying that.
They're a $10 billion a year business.
Yeah.
The Premier League is still a little bit behind on that, but has, I would say, probably a bigger global appeal.
Well, but I bet the individual players,
I think
make
that's
more
what we-
money,
Players,
not
yes,
just the
for
league.
sure.
That's the distinction.
Right.
And baseball players too. is
Yeah.
what they make.
The players, yes. The players can make, especially not everyone, but the certain few in the echelons of the game. Yeah, they make a heck of a lot of money. A lot of money a year.
It's an interesting point that I just want to quickly kind of think about is the international aspect of the NFL. I mean, I remember, Marshall remembers this very well, like the first game that the NFL played in the UK we were at, and it was like I had tears in my eyes because football had come to the UK. Now it's 4 games a year, 1 in Mexico. Marshall, maybe you can address this too. Do you really believe that international audiences need to see a cleaner version? I mean, do they think we're, like a maybe not as aggressive, not uptight
A more
version?
sanitized version.
Thank you, sanitized version of the sport.
I don't think that's necessarily what we see in the UK. It's, the NFL is very well supported in this country. I mean, it doesn't matter what teams get sent over here 4 times a year. It's a sellout, So for me, it's really more of a case that, people, the fans that do turn up, and of all particular teams, it doesn't matter if it's, the Cowboys against the Steelers, you'll still see fans from San Francisco, from Detroit, from Miami, from Minnesota, from all over, the UK and many parts of Europe come along. They understand the aspect of the game. They understand what it takes to be in the game. They understand that it has a strong physicality, and that is football. They do want to make sure that there's safety involved in that. And maybe that's the work that the NFL needs to do. We only just saw last weekend, Tom Savage with that hit that he went through and the concussion protocols and whether that needs to be looked at again. But certainly the love and the passion for American football is very strong in this country, in the UK, and very much in Europe.
Yeah. And I'll add to that too. I had the opportunity to work on the Thursday night football deal for Amazon. So for those of you who don't know, you can go on your Amazon page and you can watch Thursday night football live there. And I worked on the international distribution deals for that show. So like foreign language, international distribution, and those versions do very well.
Sure.
So the international audience is there, in my opinion. And so, so it's, I don't know that they have to sanitize it much. I mean, Marshall hit it on the head. People want the product. I think the NFL is concerned about what it looks like more than external. Yeah.
That's fair. Now, in the remaining minutes, I want to connect to something else that you do, because you are on the board of a couple of different charities, and next week we're having a conversation about sports and philanthropy. So first of all, I wanted to give you a moment to, if you wanted to say a shout out about any of the work that you're doing there, because we believe it's such an important aspect of anything that you do in life, and I think that as athletes, that's something that should be taught very early on. You know, I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, is that something that came from your experience as an athlete, or just, you know, this is how you were raised and this is what was brought into your life?
Yeah, some of it was early on. I've always volunteered and done work with children and things like that since I was in high school. And in college, I know there's a great program where our football players visit the Dale Children's Hospital in Austin. And so, you know, that bolsters it more. And then for me, that's just something I care about. And I don't make a big, I don't publicize it much. But, right now I sit on the Leadership Advisory Board for Vista Del Mar, which is it's a child and family services, not even a center. They have a whole campus in the middle of L.A. Off Motor Avenue. And it's comprehensive services for women, children, whether it's, they come from abused homes or, they're homeless and child trafficking. There's all kinds of stuff. So it's you can live on the campus. They feed you. There's programs. They bus people in all over LA, and it's all donation supported with some state help too for some of the programs they have. But it's unbelievable what they do there. And so we spend some time there, having meals with the kids and having programs all over LA and fundraisers to support. And so it's amazing. I'm going to our meeting here tonight right after this, and the other thing I'm very passionate about is my alma mater, and so I sit on the advisory council of the Moody College of Communication, which is our sort of communication college at UT, and we also have a campus here in LA, UTLA, for those Longhorns who want to come out to Los Angeles and get your foot in the entertainment industry. And so, I just feel like life's a loop. Like if you give, it'll come back to you, and you don't do it with that expectation, but more often than not, and it's not necessarily monetarily, you plant good seeds and they'll start to harvest. So
that's a great note to end the show.
It is.
Life is a loop.
Life is a loop.
I like that.
put it on the T-shirt.
Yeah. I like
Can you trade that, Mark, for us?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Distill it, a 360-degree view of life and sports.
Only if you wear that
Life
hat
is
for
a
every
loop.
show.
For every show. No, then I'll break
won't
my
allow it.
streak.
I
I
won't allow it.
haven't done
I'm burning this as soon as we're done.
Okay, okay.
It's Mike's hat. You can't burn it.
He'll be
By the way, I
okay
had
with
to
it.
borrow
He'll
it
be
from
okay with
You
it.
have to
Mike.
bring back the yellow hat. That'll be your running motif.
Do you like the yellow hat?
Yes.
Marshall, I don't even think you saw. I actually wore a yellow hat 2 weeks ago.
I didn't say it.
Yeah, it was. I swore I could, and that was also Mike's. His taste.
Thank you,
what
Mike.
Can I say? Thank you, Mike.
Yes.
I quickly want to do a little shout out to our personal, one of our personal favorite charities, which is our kids' school.
Yeah.
The Kabbalah Children's Academy. If you go to KabbalahAcademy.net, we have a very, very generous donor who is matching funds for all the donations that are made this month, up to $50,000. And why we think it's really important is because we believe in giving kids both an academic foundation that is as strong as a spiritual foundation, because we believe that, sharing and caring and doing the types of things that Jerren's talking about really does give back. It is a loop. Maybe we really need that T-shirt. Can we talk to you?
We can talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to need a commission or some royalties or something.
You got it.
That's good.
You
I'm
got
still
it.
a lawyer and sitting here now.
You got it. We're sharing and caring.
Yeah.
We're sharing and
We are.
caring.
It's a
So
loop,
it's all
remember?
good. It's a loop.
So you got to pay me.
It is a loop. So for anybody who's interested, please visit, and any donation, even if it's $5, gets matched, and it's a way to give more scholarships to kids who need it. So, and next week, we are actually usually here every other week, but because of the holidays, we are going to be here next week, Tuesday the 19th, and we're going to be talking about sports and philanthropy, because it's that time of year anyway, and we have always been passionate about seeing what the sports community can do to really elevate people, and there's so many great examples, and we'll have a guest that we're going to announce shortly.
I'm so excited to come back. Thank you. I'm kidding.
Please, you want to come back next week?
I'm kidding.
No, honestly.
I'm just kidding.
Please, we would
Yeah.
love it. We
Yeah.
would absolutely love to have you. I also want to remind everybody that you can subscribe to us on iTunes and CastBox. We also have a website where you can find our new blog, which we are now becoming very active on, and we are on Facebook and Twitter, and we really appreciate all those of you who joined us today.
And Jarvis did make it in, so Jarvis, welcome and thank you.
Yes, and thank you as always. We can't thank you enough, Jerren, for being here.
Thank you
It's
for
been a
having
pleasure,
me.
and truly, anytime you want to come,
Just crash the party.
Crash the party.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Because
Yep.
I
You got us
know
at the
that you have a
table.
lot to talk about, and we always want to hear it. So,
Yeah, thank you.
Marshall, go to sleep.
I
talk to you
I
next
will
week.
eventually, but just not yet.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for
See you
tuning
next
in.
time.
We'll see you soon.
In the future,
Okay.
talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.